We're unpacking a heavy chapter of history. Oil, betrayal, and treason that ties America and Iran together for over a century. It's like, a tangled web of power right where every move has a consequence.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how we have these interlocking stories where oil isn't just fuel, it's a geopolitical linchpin.
Right. So it all really kicks off back in 1908 when the British struck oil in Iran. The first big discovery in the Middle East, yeah? But Iran got only 16% of the profits while Britain, and later BP, reaped most of it. It's like colonialism dressed
Yeah,
up as business.
that's wild. It's almost as if the foundations of modern imperialism were being laid on an oil well.
Exactly. And, fast forward to World War I. Iran tried to stay neutral, but ended up invaded by the British, Russians, and even the Ottomans. Nearly a quarter of its population, around 2 million people, died from famine and disease. It's a grim reminder of how smaller nations can suffer when great powers clash.
It's sobering, really. When you think about neutrality, you wouldn't expect such devastating consequences.
Absolutely. And then, in the 1920s, Reza Khan comes into play, helped along by the British no less, who crowns himself Reza Shah. He modernized the country, sure, but always with an iron hand. And even during World War II, Britain and the Soviets invaded Iran again, ousting Reza Shah in favor of his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi.
So, this sets the stage for American involvement, doesn't it? Because the Cold War meant the U.S. now had its eyes on Iran.
Right, absolutely. The real twist comes in 1951 when Prime Minister Mossadegh nationalized the oil fields. For Iranians, that was a bold, heroic move. But for the West, it was a direct challenge. So much so that in 1953, the CIA and MI6 orchestrated Operation Ajax to overthrow him and reinstall the Shah. And let me tell you, this was the first instance where the CIA changed a regime in a democratic state.
Yeah, that kind of intervention really burns a lasting memory, doesn't it? I mean, it's not every day you see a democratic nation's government so thoroughly manipulated.
Exactly. And then over the next 26 years, the Shah's rule took on a brutal life of its own, ostensibly modernizing Iran, but heavily corrupt and repressive. His secret police, Savak, tortured dissidents, all while the U.S. and its allies got access to cheap oil.
And then comes 1979, a major turning point. I'm thinking this is where everything really, explodes.
Right. The Iranian Revolution brought down the Shah, after decades of repression, and ushered in a complete reversal of fortunes. Ayatollah Khomeini returns from exile, and then, the hostage crisis hits. Iranian students storm the U.S. Embassy and take 52 Americans hostage, a moment that frankly reshaped perceptions on both sides.
I can imagine that the hostage crisis amplified feelings of betrayal among Americans, but it also stemmed from decades of intervention and power plays, correct?
Precisely. And here's where things get even more, murky. The October surprise theory. While President Carter was scrambling to free the hostages, there's a claim that Reagan's campaign secretly arranged with Iran, essentially promising a better deal post-election. The hostages were released on Reagan's inauguration day, not a minute before. If that holds water, it means there was collusion with a foreign enemy to, well, win the presidency.
That's a hard pill to swallow. It almost sounds like a betrayal of democracy on a fundamental level, doesn't it?
Exactly. And Reagan didn't stop at that. In the 1980s, despite publicly demonizing Iran as a terror state, the U.S. got entangled in the Iran-Contra scandal, secretly selling weapons to Iran during the Iran-Iraq War, even funneling funds to support other covert operations in Central America. And, while all this was going on, America even backed Saddam Hussein, who turned against Iran with chemical weapons. Over 500,000 Iranians lost their lives in that conflict.
Yeah, wow, that's a brutal irony. Backing one villain to fight another, but at such a staggering human cost.
Exactly. It's as if strategic interests were placed above human lives. And then in 1988, the U.S. shot down a civilian Iranian airliner, killing 290 passengers, and they never even apologized for it. That, to me, shows a sheer disregard for accountability.
That event really sounds like a low point, when even basic principles of international conduct were sacrificed.
Right. And in more recent times, the story has taken another twist. In 2015, the Obama administration struck up the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. It was a diplomatic measured attempt, limiting uranium enrichment, bringing in inspectors, and lifting sanctions. However, then in 2018, Trump tore it up, calling it weak, and reimposed sanctions that ended up isolating Iran and emboldening its hardliners.
And that move certainly inflamed tensions even more. It seems like each U.S. administration brings its own strategy, sometimes reversing the previous one dramatically.
Exactly. Then in 2020, Trump escalated things further by ordering the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, who, despite being a polarizing figure, was revered by many Iranians and even some Americans for his role against ISIS. It was an act seen by some as preemptive security and by others as an unnecessary provocation.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, while the official narrative painted him as a terrorist, there's this other perspective that shows him as a sort of reluctant guardian, especially during the chaos of ISIS.
Exactly. It's a perspective that challenges the dominant narrative, suggesting that in the crossfires of global warfare, the lines between hero and villain can blur dramatically.
And now, here we are in 2025, with yet another cycle of tension. Iran is ramping up uranium enrichment. Talks have broken down. Sanctions are strangling the civilian population. And, to top it off, Israel is, bombing nuclear sites, while cyber attacks fly back and forth. It's like the fuse is lit, waiting for a spark.
Right. And all of this, when you really peel it back, has its roots in oil, power, and a history of betrayals, treason on multiple levels. The U.S. sees Iran as a theocratic threat, while Iran sees America as a backstabbing empire that's haunted by its own record of covert coups and armed interventions.
Yeah, it's, almost like a century-long wound that just never quite heals. Each episode of interference, each covert operation, it's all part of this larger narrative that erodes trust on both sides.
Absolutely. And while we often hear the surface-level stories, hostages, nukes, and threats, you really have to dig deep to see the recurring themes of exploitation and betrayal. It's a reminder that history is never isolated. It reverberates with every new policy decision.
True. And, I do wonder, though, don't you think that sometimes these actions are justified as necessary evils in a dangerous world? I mean, isn't there an argument that, at times, decisions in realpolitik require these unsavory choices?
That's a fair point, but respectfully, I must challenge that view. When you derail entire societies and sacrifice trust and lives for the sake of short-term gains, you're not really protecting democracy. You're, undermining the very foundations of it.
I get where you're coming from. It does seem like a double-edged sword. Strategic interests versus ethical governance.
Exactly. And, it begs the question, at what point does protecting national security start to erode national character? The history of U.S.-Iran relations shows just how deeply embedded these decisions are in the fabric of policy, and unfortunately, in our collective memory as well.
Yeah, and what's striking is how, despite the dramatic changes in leadership and global politics, the underlying issues remain eerily similar. We're still talking about oil, power, and treason.
Right. It's almost like history is stuck in a loop. Oil discovered in 1908 shaped colonial imbalances. Then, through coups, revolutions, and modern geopolitical maneuvers, that oil still holds sway over decisions that affect millions. It's like, oil has been the silent character in this saga all along.
It's a stark reminder that sometimes economic interests can overshadow even the most basic human rights and democratic ideals.
Absolutely. And it forces us as citizens to question those narratives. Why are we so quick to label an enemy as a threat, and what happens when our actions betray our professed values? The story really forces a reflection on what, democracy means when it becomes entangled with self-interest.
It comes down to accountability, doesn't it? If we're not holding ourselves to the highest standards, then we're just perpetuating the cycle of betrayal and deep-rooted mistrust.
Exactly. And it, challenges us to confront these uncomfortable truths about past coups, secret deals, and decisions made in the shadows that echo into our present. It's a call not just for historical awareness, but for a commitment to transparency moving forward.
Yeah, this conversation really brings home how intricate and painful this history is, and it makes you wonder what lessons we're really learning from it all.
Indeed, it's a complex, ongoing story of ambition, betrayal, and survival, one that reminds us that history is not just the past, but a blueprint for our future decisions. And maybe, just maybe, if we learn from these missteps, we can avoid repeating them.
That's a powerful thought. History as a guide rather than a burden. Thanks for exploring this with such depth.
Thank you. Let's just hope that in acknowledging this century-long wound, we can start to heal and build a future that respects both truth and democracy.